Hello. We come to, we go back a little, a few years back, because we need to talk about the last event of the Cold War, and that was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. There is plenty of information in this lesson, in the content of this lesson, about Afghanistan, what was happening before the Soviets got involved in Afghanistan, what was going on, who was the president, why is it that the conflict began. And to summarize, the conflict began because the president that took over in Afghanistan, he was pro-socialism, pro-communism, but that was not the most serious problem. The most serious problem is that the region of Afghanistan is still today Muslim, and it's very fundamentalist Muslim. And the president wanted to change Afghan society. He wanted to give women more rights. He didn't want Afghanistan to be ruled following the Muslim tradition. He wanted Afghanistan to have more freedoms, but this was against the fundamentalist Islamic groups, and they reacted against him, not so much because of communism, but because they felt that their social life and their traditions were being threatened. And then that's how eventually these fundamentalist Muslims, the Mujahideen, revolted against the government. And it was at that time when the American President Carter was at the time, he realized that the Mujahideen were going to go against the pro-Soviet government. And the United States began to support the Mujahideen with arms and with advice. And there was one, if you happen to have time, watch a movie called Charlie's War, because Charlie was a congressman, and he had the vision of what was happening, and he said, if we support the Mujahideen, then we are going to make the Soviet Union bleed. And that's how the United States got involved in this. So it really was the Soviets against the United States, supporting the Mujahideen. This is very interesting because this lasted about 10 years, so it was really the last 10 years of the Cold War, and what the United States wanted to do, it was accomplished, because they wanted the Soviets to suffer a Vietnam-style war, and they did. So this was the Soviet Vietnam. Now, an unintended consequence of that was that those Mujahideen that were supported by the United States eventually won, and one of the groups that resulted in taking control of Afghanistan was the Taliban. But there is another unintended consequence, and it was among the Mujahideen that were fighting the Soviets was somebody that we know his name very well, Osama bin Laden. And what is ironic is that the United States helped in the rise of Osama bin Laden during the time that Osama bin Laden is fighting in Afghanistan. Another unfortunate, unintended consequence was the suffering of the Afghan people, because for those 10 years, Afghanistan and the Afghans were used by, again, the two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States. And in that conflict, supported by those two superpowers, the ones who suffered and who died and who bled were the Afghans. When the conflict was over and the Cold War was over, the United States left and the Afghans were left there in poverty with a devastated country, and no one paid any more attention to them. It was one of the cruel events during the last part of the Cold War.